across Texas. The issue is.
I'm Greg Grugan in Houston.
I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas.
And this is Texas, the issue is.
North Texas Congressman Colin Allred is preparing to leave his Democrat-friendly seat in the House to go statewide, challenging Ted Cruz for the U.S. Senate. Allred has flipped his red seat to a blue seat, and he thinks he can do it statewide. I went one-on-one with him during the annual Juneteenth walk in Fort Worth.
Say hello, Senator-elect.
Congressman Colin Allred met with supporters in Fort Worth during the annual Juneteenth walk with Opal Lee. She was instrumental in having Juneteenth recognized as a federal holiday in 2021.
Ted Cruz, we got to get rid of him too.
We got to get rid of Ted.
Yeah.
That's what you're running for, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you think we don't know? We've been following.
I know.
The 40-year-old former NFL athlete is now in his third term in Congress. In May, he announced something bigger, that he's running for the U.S. Senate.
Beto O'Rourke was the closest to do it. What sets you apart? You're trying to appeal to, Republicans and independents. What makes you different than Beto O'Rourke or any other Democrat running against Ted Cruz?
Well, I think we know as Texans that we can't afford to have another term of Ted Cruz representing us in the Senate. And that's really what it's about. It's not about the presidential race. It's not about past races. This is about me versus Ted Cruz. We know we can't count on him in a crisis. He went on vacation during our freeze. And he's one of the people who tried to lead the insurrection on January 6th. So I think that's not the Texas that I know.
You flipped a district,
Yep.
but now you're taking it statewide. That's a big difference. What changes now for you?
Well, not much actually. It's the same approach. It's trying to get, bring folks together to try and get more people involved in our democracy because, I was a voting rights lawyer and I think that matters to me. I want to see us increase our voter turnout. But it's also about getting folks who maybe don't see themselves reflected in this version of the Republican Party, or certainly don't see themselves the same way Ted Cruz represents them. Give them a chance to vote for somebody like me.
Do you think the Biden administration has done enough in reference to fixing the problem, the surge at the border?
Well, my family's from Brownsville. My grandfather was a customs officer after the Second World War when he fought in the Navy. I know that our border communities have deserved more support over multiple administrations because this is not the first time we've seen surges of migrants coming to those communities, and it's often been the case that the federal government has not done enough. But it's also true that for 10 years, Ted Cruz has been in the Senate. He's done nothing to fix this problem. It's not just a situation where you go to the border and point out problems and act like you're on a safari. You're a legislator. You're in the United States Senate. Pass legislation to actually deal with this.
What should the Biden administration be doing different on the border if you could come up with a suggestion?
Well, honestly, they need to have more resources to put in our border communities to deal with the surge. We need to process people faster. The asylum process is entirely too slow. But some of it also is on Congress. Our immigration system is broken, and there's only so much any administration can do. Just saying that you're going to build a wall is not a solution. Yes, we have some physical barriers there. We want to channel folks to ports of entry, but that's not a solution to our immigration system. It's much more complicated than that.
Allred says he is willing to work across the aisle. He pointed out Texas's senior Senator John Cornyn has tried to do that.
John Cornyn has voted for and was one of the main proponents behind the CHIPS and Science Act. It's going to help our scientific economy here. He was a big proponent of the first time in 30 years we passed gun violence prevention legislation. He's actually tried to do things. He voted the other day not to have us default on our debt. Ted Cruz did not.
Do you think inflation is due in part to Democrats spending too much money?
So it's not based on just our policies. Certainly, some of it has to be with supply chain disruption, cost of labor increasing, folks changing where they work. All these things have contributed to it, and some long-term trends that have come together. One of the biggest drivers right now is housing and the cost of housing. That's a long-term trend that's kind of come to a head during the pandemic. That's one of the things I want to help us address. Nice to meet you. Yeah, nice to meet you.
All right, my word to describe that interview, uphill. Greg, what do you say?
Stephen, I'm catching your drift. My word is underdog.
Okay, the Fox Texas trio, or duo for right now. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back. Our trio partner, Rudy Koski, is on vacation, so joining us is Mark Jones from Rice University. Greg, you'll get the first stab at this, I should say. It's an uphill battle for Colin Allred trying to win a statewide seat. Can he win the Democratic nomination for Senate outright?
Good question. Given the demographic shift in the Lone Star State, a moderate, charismatic Latino would give Allred all he can handle and then some. Whether that is San Antonio State Senator Roland Gutierrez or one of the Castro brothers or even a female candidate from the left wing of the party, Allred will likely have his hands full just getting to a one-on-one battle with Ted Cruz, and in a race where the greenback will not be a holdback for the incumbent. An expensive primary fight could leave the last Democrat standing semi-broke and battered going into the fall.
Mark, Greg mentioned money. Allred is known in North Texas. He's in his third term, but Texas is a huge state, requires a lot of money. How can Allred get that name recognition as far as El Paso, South Texas, and those areas?
Well, that takes two things. One, traveling the state nonstop, which is difficult to do when you're a sitting member of Congress like Congressman Allred. Ted Cruz, back when he didn't have a day job, could do that when he was competing against David Dewhurst and raise his name recognition. Allred's going to have more difficulty. The other way to do it is raising lots of money. But that's also going to be a challenge for Allred because national Democrats have a bare majority in the U.S. Senate, and the 8 most vulnerable seats, or the most competitive seats, are all Democratic-held seats in places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Nevada, and Montana, West Virginia. So Democrats are first and foremost going to put their money there, and effectively it's a lot easier to campaign in smaller states there, and your money goes a lot further, say in Arizona, Nevada, Montana, West Virginia, Ohio, and Michigan, all for about the same price it would cost to run a statewide campaign here in Texas.
Greg, are we making too big of a deal when it comes to name recognition? Is name recognition not really the issue in this case?
Yeah, I think it really is. Say what you want about Beto, but everyone in this state knew who he was and pretty much what he was about because he was an energetic, dogged, ultra marathoner on the campaign trail who smashed fundraising records which paid for a prolific ad buy in a major ground game. And he still lost statewide twice. So is Allred capable of matching that effort and drumming up the necessary cash? He's going to have to be because just running as the antidote for Cruz fatigue won't get him there. Not in a state where even Ken Paxton won by double digits just 7 months ago.
Texas is a red state. Beto O'Rourke, as you mentioned, was the closest to do it against Ted Cruz, but he still was not able to win. This question's for you both. Mark first. What changes in 2024 from Beto O'Rourke getting very close against Ted Cruz in the past?
Well, I think it's actually going to be harder for Allred. Beto was able to sneak up on Cruz from behind because effectively Republicans were asleep at the switch and weren't ready for the Democratic challenge they faced back in 2018. You also had an advantage for Democrats in that they could campaign and mobilize against an unpopular Donald Trump in the White House, but he wasn't on the ballot providing mobilization from the other side. That said, Allred is the high-quality, top-tier candidate that Democrats need if they're ever going to break their statewide losing streak, which dates back to 1996. They haven't won a statewide race since 1994. So you need someone with Allred's caliber and ability to be running, because if Democrats don't get that, then they have no hope of defeating Cruz. Right now, they do at least have the race, if Allred's the candidate, among the top 2 Democratic targets against Republican seats. That's against Cruz here in Texas and Senator Rick Scott in Florida.
Greg Green, you got the last word.
Look, I'm not sure anything changes. The challenges for Democrats remain the same. Getting progressive-leaning Latinos to reflect their actual numbers at the polls, and convincing Texas independent voters that Joe Biden's policies are better for them than those projected by Ted Cruz and company. Over the next 16 months, I just don't see either happening in an election-altering way. I was interested in Allred talking about, in a positive way, Senator Cornyn. I think that's an attempt to go after independents.
All right, really quick, yes or no answer. Mark, do you think Colin Allred can win the Democratic nomination?
I think he can win the Democratic nomination. He may have a challenge from Roland Gutierrez, but I think he would be the strong favorite to win it.
Greg, quick answer.
Look, I think Colin Allred is a very attractive, articulate candidate. He's just got to get his name out there. Can he beat Cruz? I think that's a real long shot.
All right, that's all the time we have. To see this interview or any of our past interviews, go to our station's YouTube channels and keep the conversation going with us by interacting with us on our social media sites.
The Fox Texas Trio is off next week for a little summer vacation, but we will be back in business July 9th to discuss another contentious topic. In the meantime, be sure to let us know what you think the issue is.